This video has been sponsored by Nvidia Studio and PC Specialist. Link in the description.
Cameras. Cameras are pretty cool things if you know what you're doing with them. And they can actually relieve a lot of the editing stress. Because who needs to drag and drop a whip pan transition in when you can just whip pan the camera itself? So today we're going to learn about the camera basics. That is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Now this is just the very basics. There's a lot more to camera manipulation than this, but we got to start easy because we're going to go through quite a lot today. And it should go without saying that this isn't a tutorial based on your specific camera. So I don't want to see anyone in the comments saying, "But Finn, my camera doesn't do me." This is just a tutorial on general camera knowledge and not a specific brand.
So without further ado,
This is a camera, or more specifically, a DSLR.
Most of you who are looking at going into video making probably have one of these already.
Something with these spinning adjustment wheels and a detachable lens as well.
So if you're looking to get into filmmaking or video creation, then I highly recommend that you get one of these because they're going to give you full creative control over the images that you produce.
So what is aperture? I mean, there is no easier way to understand what aperture is other than looking at an eyeball. On our eyeballs we have our pupils, and our pupils dilate when there's not enough light to let more in, and our pupils narrow when there's too much light to stop so much coming in. It's very similar with the aperture in a camera lens. We open it up to let more light in, and we close it down to keep light out. On our camera displays, this is measured as f-stop. It's a number in the corner of your screen, which when it's lower will create a brighter image, and when it's higher will create a darker image.
But listen, as easy as that is, changing the aperture isn't just about how light or dark the image is. No, changing the aperture also creates the depth of field effect, which is commonly associated with cinematic imagery. See, look here, when my aperture is on the lowest setting possible, we're letting in more light and creating a shallow depth of field. This means a blurrier background, but generally speaking it's harder to get focus when it's like this, because there's such a small amount of space that can be in focus at one time. Whereas if I pump the aperture to its highest f-stop, then the image is going to be incredibly deep with focus. That means that everything that you're seeing is probably going to be in focus. But Finn, what if there's a really dark scene and I need a high aperture for a deep focus? That's a good question, and that leads us nicely into shutter speed and ISO.
it's me, baby! Hello, ladies and Finns! It's Salesman Finn here.
Nearly every camera these days has some sort of 4K capability, am I right? Am I right? Even my 3-year-old phone has a 4K mode. You telling me that's an easy file to play back, let alone in Premiere Pro? No! Of course it's not! This shit makes PCs lag, crash, and seize up like an old man. And do you know why that is? I'll tell you why, ladies and Finns. Don't worry about it. Because they ain't using that sweet Nvidia Studio certified system. That's right. When Finn here used to edit his comedy sketch videos, he used to have to pump that playback quality all the way down to 1/4. Do you even know what that's like? I hope not. But listen to me. Hey. I got a sale for you. These scientists over at Nvidia have packed their graphics cards with a special chip called NVENC. And this thing does encoding and decoding like young Arnold pumps iron. This means buttery smooth playback on 4K files at maximum quality. Thank you. Now go on, get out of here. Go down to the PC Specialist website and the link in the description and go and make your studio system today. Nvidia system, get me the hell out of here.
Right. So now we know what aperture is. We know that it changes the exposure of the image whilst having a payoff with the depth of field in one way or another. What was next? Oh, yeah, shutter speed and ISO. Let's do that.
Every digital camera these days has a digital sensor. This sensor lies behind the shutter and captures the light that we let in. By taking an image or recording, we let in light just for a split second. And then within that split second of light being shown, the camera sensor takes that light information and digitally sends it to the storage as a frame. The typical cinema format is to shoot at 24 frames a second. So let's say that we hit record for exactly 1 second. That sensor will be exposed to light 24 times and will produce 24 sequential images to the storage, which will be shown as 1 second of footage. Now you see that? That is the shutter.
That is the thing that is letting in the light to our sensor behind. So can we guess what shutter speed is? Yes, that's right. It is indeed the measurement of how long that light exposure lasts. See, watch here. The higher I pump up the shutter speed, the faster the exposure to light is. And like with aperture and its depth of field, changing the shutter speed does come with some payoffs, some of which can actually be desirable depending on the scene you shoot. A higher shutter speed means sharper and choppier looking motion, as well as a darker image. And as you can see, my hand almost never shows any motion blur while I wave. This is because the shutter is only opening for 1/250th of a second for each frame, which hardly captures any motion. In comparison, if I bring the shutter speed down to 1/25th of a second, the motion blur on my hand increases dramatically, as well as creating a brighter image. The shutter is now opening for a longer time and exposing the sensor to more light per frame, and in turn, a lot more motion blur. Now, the rule of thumb when making videos is that you should keep the shutter speed about double what your frame rate is. So if you're at 24 or 25 FPS, then you should really be aiming for 1/50 on shutter speed. The reason for this is because it's like a happy medium between the two. You don't have extreme motion blur, but at the same time, you don't have that sharp choppiness that a high shutter speed gives you.
Now that brings us on to ISO. ISO is the sensor's sensitivity to the light exposure that we put on the sensor through the shutter and aperture. Does that make sense? Basically, the higher you have the ISO, then the brighter the image is going to be, because the sensor is more sensitive to that light hitting it, whereas the lower the number, then the darker the image will be. Now, once again, like with aperture and shutter speed, there is a payoff to this. Having a higher ISO means that you'll have a lot more visual noise, or what's called grain, in the image. This doesn't always look great if you have it too high. Generally speaking, in content creation, it's more desirable to have a lower ISO, which means less visual noise and a cleaner picture altogether. But you have to make up for the darkness with aperture and shutter speed, or lights on set. So in a nutshell, higher number, brighter image, but also more noise. Lower number, darker image, and less noise.
So basically that's it. That's the exposure triangle of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Altogether, they create an exposure for your image. Depending on your filming conditions, you're gonna have to compromise in some of these areas, and you can create lots of different effects just by changing these three things. Usually, every DSLR should have this exposure wheel at the bottom, maybe in the center of the screen or in one of the corners, where it lets you know if your shot has a good exposure or not. If it's too bright, it will be in the positive, and if it's too dark, it'll be in the negative. We've learned a lot today about cameras. I think that this topic has a lot of room to keep going on because there's so much more to cameras than just what I've shown you today. And of course, if you want to learn more about your camera and how to use it properly, then leave a comment and let me know that you want to see more. I've got a lot of topics that I could cover with this. I don't even have anything to say at this point. I'm just taking you guys on a walk with me. Sheep. I'm walking with my dog over here. What are you going to do about it? Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully now that you've learned how to use aperture, shutter speed, and ISO together, you can create some great images. Thank you so much to Nvidia and PC Specialist for sponsoring this video. They're gods, so go check out the link in the description. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, wait, I got one more thing to say. What are you doing here? Get the hell out of here! Go on! Get out of here! You get out of here! Go on! Get the hell out of here! What are you doing? What are you doing? Get out of here! Get out of here! That felt so weird. It's still going.